Hold on, sorry. I forgot to turn that on. Hey, good morning. So glad you guys are here as we are continuing our series on traveling light, what it looks like for us to be able to travel light. I can't speak this morning for some reason. Hey, listen, how many of you guys had a great Thanksgiving this week? Good Thanksgiving? All right, good. How many ate all the food? Everybody eat all the food? Good. Who's still eating on leftovers this afternoon? All right. We're eating all the food, and I ate a lot of food myself, and I think a lot of times when we think about what we're eating at Thanksgiving, are there those things that people are just like, you have to have at Thanksgiving that you're like, no, I don't like that. Like, I don't know why that is a stamp of Thanksgiving. We have to have, and tell me if you're one of those families, you have to have the cranberry jelly that came out of the can. It's literally the shape of the can. And I'm like, my dad has to have that. And I'm like, why? Like, it's like, we got to shake it out of the can, and then it's like, bloop, and then it just like jiggles on the plate. I'm like, it just seems disgusting to me. I'm not going to eat that. I'm not going to do it. There are things that people tell us, right? People say, hey, listen, this is great. You need to eat this. And I'm sorry, you can't convince me of some of these things that people are saying are very, very good. I just don't like it. One in particular, cottage cheese. No, disgusting. Never. Don't ask me to eat it. I'm not going to do it. Sorry, that's disgusting. I always tell people, you want some cottage cheese, just put some milk in a container, leave it in your dashboard of your car for a couple weeks. You'll have cottage cheese, all right? Disgusting. I don't like it. I like you if you eat it, but I don't like it, okay? So there's those things that people are always like that you're supposed to like, right? I will give credit to my wife. Before I met my wife, I was a really picky eater. Now I'm just somewhat of a picky eater, but I'm not a big fan of absolutely everything. There's things that I'll try and things that I will give a shot. But when you're talking about things, I'm always worried about something tastes bad. I hate when I get a taste in my mouth and then you can't get that taste out, right? It's always so funny. When my kids have to take medicine or something, they have to have a drink on tap ready to go because they don't want that taste of medicine on the back of their throat the whole time. They're absolutely a stickler for that, right? Have you guys ever tasted something that's intensely bitter? Have you guys ever had something that's just so bitter? I mean, does it not just shake you to your core when something's bitter? Like you feel in the back of your throat, your whole face changes, your demeanor changes. It just ruins your day when something tastes bad, right? Bitterness is one of those things that is actually a really, really nasty thing. And I want to talk about that for a little bit. But let's talk about where we're coming from. We're talking about traveling light, letting go of things, right? First week we heard from Trent about letting go of distractions, things that maybe are distracting us from the most important things in our life. And we're allowing those things to take over our thoughts and our actions. Last week we heard from Tony about letting go of stuff, letting go of the stuff that maybe is crowding who we are and who we are supposed to be, right? So we have to be able to let those things go. It's that time of the year, right? We think a lot about stuff. And to be able to let go of those things so we can actually focus on what's important. This week, if I can, just for a few minutes, I want to talk about the idea of letting go of bitterness. From getting to a place where we are not allowing bitterness to become such a control in our life. Now, maybe you're sitting here and you're like, bitterness is not really a problem I have. I don't think I'm a very bitter person. But we all do deal with this idea of bitterness so much so that the Bible actually discussed how we are supposed to deal with bitterness very often. And we're going to jump into that a little bit. But someone once said this about bitterness. They said, never let bitterness make a home in your heart. Raise the rent and kick it out. All right? What we're supposed to do with bitterness is we're not supposed to let it sit there. We're not supposed to let it fester. We're not supposed to let it take over and control us. We are supposed to get rid of that bitterness in our life. But the big question is, how exactly do we do that? I don't think anyone sits here and says, oh yeah, I love bitterness. I love when I have it in my life, right? We are not to live a bitter lifestyle. This is something that's known, and we all know that it's something we're supposed to do. But look at here, the writer in Hebrews talked about this idea of of bitterness, and I want to share it with you here in Hebrews chapter 12. It says, make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and to defile many. The idea is that this thing will build up inside of you. It takes root. It really takes hold of your heart and takes a hold of your life and the decisions that you make and the way that your emotions are ran, and everything that we do can be messed up by the root of bitterness that we grow up into our own lives. He actually says there, that the writer said, see to it no one falls short of the grace of God, that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. So I want you guys to understand that bitterness, that thing that we think maybe we're holding on to and we're the only one dealing with it, we're the only one that's going through it. I want you to know that when a root of bitterness grows up, not only does it affect you, but it affects everything and everyone that we encounter. When we are controlled by our bitterness, when we let that bitterness take control of us, it can cause so many issues, so many problems with the people and the situations that we find are in. It will happen and mess with your relationships in your family, with your friends, in where you work, how you work, with the people that you hang out with the church that you attend. All the things that we do, those things are affected by our bitterness. And so much so that the writer of Hebrews saw it as a big deal and wanted to make sure that everyone knew, listen, in order for us truly to live in peace and to be holy and to be able to show that grace of God to everyone, we cannot let bitterness take a hold of us. So if I can, just for a few minutes, to talk about this idea of kicking out the bitterness and getting rid of it, I want to talk about a little thing we can do. All you can do is simply take the letter I out of bitter and replace it with E and be better. So we want to talk about how we can go from being bitter to being better and switching out those letters, right? But the question is, how do we do that? How do we go from bitter to better? Now, I think it's also important that we remember this. When we're talking about being better, that's a statement that I actually say a lot. I say it to my kids. I say it to myself, right? The problem with that, saying to be better, right? Like my kids, if they come to me and they said, oh, that team did this, or, when they're playing sports and they cheated, or that shouldn't have happened, or the refs did this. You know what I say? Don't get mad, get better. I always tell them that. Don't get mad, don't get worked up, just get better. You want to beat them next time? Be better. My Buckeyes yesterday, you got to be better, right? Don't be mad, just be better, all right? That was a whooping yesterday, right? I'm a little bitter about it right now, I'm not going to lie. But the fact of the matter is that even though we try to be better, apart from God, we cannot do it. So I want you to know this morning that when we're talking about being better, it's with the concept of understanding that in order for us to be better, we have to take our cues from the one that is the best. And who is that? That's Jesus Christ himself. He was absolutely perfect in every single way. 100% man, 100% God. So this is who we take our cues from. This is how we learn to move from bitterness to being better. And so how do we do that? I want to show you two simple things, if I can, this morning, and what we can truly do in order to grow from being bitter to being better. The first thing that I think we have to be able to do is to discover what's bitter. We have to be able to discover what it is that we find bitter in our lives, because it's different for other people, okay? It's different for people in different phases of life or what's going on and who they are. And it doesn't matter if you're 7 or 70. Every single one of us deal with bitterness, right? Every single kid deals with being mad because that kid took that toy from them, or that teacher gave them a detention, or whatever the case may be. A 70-year-old can be mad because their friend didn't show up for dinner one night, or the grandkids came over and just ransacked the entire house, right? We can be bitter about simple things, big things. We can be bitter at our spouses. We can be bitter at our best friends. We can be bitter to absolutely anyone. And what that ends up doing is growing something in our hearts that I don't think we're ready for that. We can be bitter, get ready for this, we can be bitter towards God. We can be bitter about the situation that we find ourselves in and blaming God for that situation that we find ourselves in. And we start to resent God, and we start to get angry. And when we do those things, what you actually end up doing is those things not only start to be the thing that controls our decision making, but what it does is starts to choke out and control our hope, our joy, our contentment, our happiness. It takes control of all those things. So we have to be able to understand and decide and discover what truly is bitter. We have to recognize what exactly those things are that actually cause us to be bitter. We have to get down to the root of the issue, right? If any of you have ever tried to get any kind of bush or anything outside of your house, you can't just cut off the top, right? The roots are still down in there, right? It's going to be a problem. You have to dig it up. You have to get those things out. So you have to be able to discover what those are. I'm going to be honest with you today, all right? I'm going to confess, all right? I hope you don't think I've ever lying to you, but I'm going to be really blunt honest with you this morning, all right? So for me, I've always enjoyed sports. I love all the sports, but basketball was always my passion. Loved basketball, loved playing basketball, loved watching basketball. Still do, right? Coach my kids' teams. I do Little League stuff. I'm involved in all that. I love it. I really do. I wasn't very good. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't very good at all right? What they like to call, I used to ride the pine, as they say, right? So I didn't play very much, all right? But what ends up happening is now that I'm older, a lot of times you don't get as many opportunities to play ball or do stuff like that. You just get old and fat and lazy, and you don't do those things anymore, right? So for me, anytime that I had an opportunity to play in a men's league or a church league or anything like that, I always tried to jump at that opportunity because I love playing. I love being able to do those things because you don't get to do that as often as you used to. But here's one thing that I found out. I have played against guys who I went to school with, like in high school or I went to college with or anything like that, right? Guys I was friends with, guys that maybe I wasn't friends with, but maybe I played and was a teammate with them. I want you guys to know something. I've been in situations with friends of mine or people that I was acquaintances with that their life is a mess. It really is. And I mean like sad. Like I've prayed about that. I've talked to some of those guys about that before, and I've really asked God, like, God, I hope you just show up in a big way in their life because I know they're struggling. I know they're going through a lot of things. But do you know what, something? I'm going to tell you about the bitterness in my heart. In that moment, I'm like, you know what? I recognize, God, you've been so good to me, and you've blessed me, and you've given me a family and a steady job, and you've kept me on a good path, and I'm thankful for that. But you know, sometimes those guys I play against that I know their life is in shambles and things are rough, and they're playing against me, and they're just straight balling against me. I'm like, I want your life so bad right now. I want everything you are right now in this moment. Why? Because deep down inside of me, all I want to be able to do in that moment is be good at a sport, right? I want to be better than that person. There is a root of bitterness inside of me because what happens to me is I look back at even high school sports and I think, listen, like I could have been better if it wasn't for that coach or that situation or that injury or all these different things, right? Because fellas, hey, ladies alike, you all know, the farther you're out from high school sports, the better you are when you tell people stories about yourself, right? Like now my kids, I'm dunking on 5th and 6th graders, right? And they're like, oh, you must have been pretty good. I'm like, yeah, I was pretty good. It's pretty good. I was really good, actually. Like the story just gets bigger and bigger as you get older and older and older, right? And it's like, if Coach would have put me in, we would have won, I'm telling you. He didn't like me. He had a problem with me. You know, so those stories, they build up inside. Why? Because we have a bitterness. And I know that seems silly and it seems dumb. But honestly, for me, it was truly something inside of me that said, because maybe I wasn't as good as some of these other guys, that maybe I was inferior in some way, that there was something wrong with me, right? And that in that moment, I would trade having a good life, having a good family and all that just to be able to shoot threes better than that guy, right? It's crazy, really. It's silly. It's stupid. But it's truly something inside of me that I recognize as a root of bitterness. That even as little as it is, that I let those things grow inside my heart and inside my head and honestly start to take over my thoughts. That somehow, some way, that God did something to me and that I couldn't be good at stuff. And I tried hard. I gave everything I had. And I'm like, come on, man. Can I get a little leadway? You know what I mean? It was truly a root that was growing inside of me. This happens about once or twice a week. Not even kidding. My wife and I, she has a much wider palate than I for different kinds of food, right? And she has led me down a path of trying different things. And I'm all good. I'm all good for trying things, right? But a lot of times we'll be talking, and she'll talk about food or whatever. She's making something, or we had a lot of conversation this time around Thanksgiving, right? And she'll say, have you ever had that? I'm going to make some of this, or I'm going to try this, or we're going to order this. And I'll say, ooh, I don't want that, right? And she'll say, why don't you want it? And I'll say, because I don't like it. And do you know what she says every single time? Have you tried it? And usually I say, yes, when really the answer is no. Well, why didn't you try it? Because it looks weird, and I don't want it. Look at that. That looks weird. Or I don't like to do things that look weird, or I really don't like to try things that smell weird, right? Like, no joke, every trip we ever take, when we go to a gas station, I love getting a good snack at the gas station, all right, on a long drive, all right? My wife, and I'm just beating up on her bad this morning, she loves to pick the stinkiest chips possible that they have in the gas station and eat those in front of me. She gets like Funyuns or something. I'm like, what are you doing? I don't want this entire car smelling like a nasty foot right now the entire time. So I don't eat Funyuns. It smells bad. I don't want it, right? What we end up doing is, in order for us to figure out where we're at, the whole reason I bring up that story is because in order for us to figure out what we are bitter at, we have to be able to look around and figure those things out, right? In order for us to figure out if we truly like something or don't like it, we have to be able to try it. We have to be able to actually search for it and look for it. So for you this morning, what is it? Is it a past experience? Is it a person? Is it a situation that you're in right now? What is it that's starting to grow that root, that bitter root inside of you that you find yourself being taken over by in your relationships and in your life? What is the thing that ends up happening? Think about this. Here's an easy way to think about it, all right? Most people, I would say, we get bitter about situations and we get bitter about, places that we're at. But more than likely, we get the most bitter with people, right? Why? Because people, including myself, are dumb, right? So we get mad at each other. We get angry with each other, all right? We start to build up this anger and malice in our heart for people, all right? Here's a quick test. Think about certain people in your life, all right? If someone were to come along and say, you know what? You know Tony Barker? Yeah, I know Tony. I can't stand that guy, right? And if your first reaction is to go, me neither, and start just dogging him right there in that moment, I think you got a little bitterness in your heart, okay? Think about this. What are those situations that we're ready just to grab onto and to gravitate to because now those things are starting to take over every part of our lives? We have to be able to discover what is bitter. In order for us to be able to fix the problem, we must first identify the problem and what it is that we are dealing with. What are those things that start to truly take over your life? Now, in order for us first to be able to discover what's bitter, now the second step is this. We have to be able to decide what's better. We have to be able to now have a perspective of seeing what those things are, those things that truly do build up that bitter root inside of us. And now we have to be able to decide what is the better thing to do here. What is the decision that is supposed to be made here, right? So we know that bitterness, it grows from anger and it grows from rage and it grows from malice in our heart. But what does this better grow from? It goes from love. It grows from forgiveness. It grows from contentment for our situation. It grows from all these wonderful, wonderful places. So the question for you when we're talking about what's better is, who is it that you need to be able to show that love to? Who is it that you need to show that forgiveness to? What is the situation in your life that you need to be able to understand what that grace is? You remember back in Hebrews, it told us that we need to see to it that no one falls short of the grace of God. Absolutely no one falls short of the grace of God. He said, see to it, nobody falls short of it. That is so important for us to remember. Do you realize that no matter if someone has hurt you or wronged you, or if anyone has done something to you, I want you to know that they do not fall short of God's grace. They fall short of God's glory, but they do not fall short of God's grace. That is something very hard for us to reconcile in our hearts, right? There are people that were like, listen, I know some of the horrible things that they've done. No way I could forgive them. You're not asked to forgive them. You're asked to understand that God can forgive them. You're asked to understand that God can forgive you. This is so important for us to understand. This is how we start to deal with our bitterness. This is how we start to switch the letter from the I to the E, and we grow from being bitter to being better. We're able to do this when we understand what it is God did for us. When we start to understand that He told us that while we were still sinners, Christ died for the ungodly. This is exactly the gospel. This is the good news. When we start understanding that our bitterness grows from a place of wanting to hate and wanting to gang up on people, when we start seeing that that's where it's coming from, then we can decide, just as Paul tells us in Ephesians, it says, get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling, and slander, along with every form of malice. If we are to make those things happen, we have to decide, I'm no longer going to be controlled by my bitterness, but I am going to be better because Christ forgives the sinners. That's the gospel. That's the good news. Look at what it says here in Proverbs chapter 14, which is just a great book if you're just looking for some general tidbits of knowledge that you need in your life. Go check out Proverbs. It says in Proverbs 14, each heart knows its own bitterness, and no one else can share its joy. Each heart knows its own bitterness. When you start to search inside of yourself, you are going to find out what that thing is that really bothers you. You are going to find out that thing that really starts to mess with you and really works you up and gets you angry. It won't take very long, because guess what? If you can't find it, other people will. When that certain person gets brought up or that certain situation gets brought up and people see how you react, they're going to see the bitterness within your heart really, really fast. That's exactly what Proverbs is trying to say. So we each and every one of us have a choice to become better or bitter in our lifetime. Every single one of us have that choice. The better is what? The better is that God loves. The better is that God forgives. The better is that God gives us a way to escape that bitterness through His Son, Jesus Christ. That's what makes this so important for us to remember. Here's what I want you to remember too. You have bitterness or hate or malice in your heart for someone. This is something that has always gone a long way for me, and I still struggle with this to this day. If there's someone who controls your anger, controls your emotions, controls your decision-making, a person or a situation, I want you to know that those people that you get all worked up and that you're losing sleep over and that you're crying over and that you're getting angry over, I want you to know more than likely those people, they're putting their head on the pillow and going right to sleep tonight. They're not giving you another thought. And what we end up doing is we start putting so much into what that person thinks or being angry about what that person said or about how they wronged you or about how they did this to you and this and that. And that person's like, I didn't even know that person was mad at me. I didn't even know I did anything to them. Now, that could be because the person's a jerk. It could be because the person is just ignorant and doesn't even know what's happening. It could be those things. But in the end, what is it to us if we are going to allow someone else to control our emotions and our decision making? The only one who should be in control of any of that is God and God alone. Too often we let other people control how we react to situations instead of understanding the grace of God and letting God be the one who controls that situation. So if this morning you are truly one of those people and you're struggling with that bitterness, maybe you're recognizing some of those things now. If you're struggling with that, I want to encourage you about what it means to truly spend time in prayer and what it means to have a loving and forgiving heart. In order for you to switch those letters, you have to first be able to discover what is bitter in your life. So if I can, for just a few minutes, would you guys please just bow your heads with me and close your eyes? And I'm going to ask you to do something really quick this morning. I'm going to ask you to talk to God and to ask Him to search your heart. A prayer that was given was to search my heart and ask if there is any wicked thought or any offensive way in my life that would offend God. I want you to think about those situations. Maybe you already have one on the tip of your tongue. Maybe you have one in the top of your head already. But where is it this morning? Maybe you have some bitterness growing up. Maybe there's just a little thing taking root right now. Maybe there's something that is absolutely overtaking your life right now. You are controlled by that bitterness. Your decision making, your family is affected. Your friendships are affected. The way that you carry yourself is affected by your bitterness. Why? Why is that happening? Why is that the thing that we grab onto? Why is that the thing that we hold on to? Because misery loves company, doesn't it? As we're coming into the holiday season, and I know it sounds cliche and a little dorky even, but isn't the holidays just a good time to seek out forgiveness and to seek out reconciliation? So this morning, as you look at the situations that you're in and the people in your life, and you discover that bitterness and you see what that thing is that maybe is something that's keeping you from showing God's love, how about this morning you switch those letters? How about this morning you have a conversation with God that you're no longer going to be bitter, but you're going to let God make you better because He's the best. Maybe you're here this morning and maybe the idea of Christianity, maybe the idea of Jesus Himself, just because of the situations you have been in, maybe you've grown bitter to Jesus and His love for you. I want you to know I get it. You look at this sometimes and you think this is a bunch of nonsense. So many hypocrites and people who aren't living what they say. You're right. Jesus died for those hypocrites, and He died for you. All you have to do is trust Him. Repent and turn to Him. If you want that this morning, if you're in the building or you're watching online, all you have to do is talk to Him. You can have a conversation right there where you're at right now. You can say something like this to Him right there where you're at. You can say, God, I know I'm not perfect. I know that I've messed up, but I know that the good news is that I don't have to be perfect because you gave me your perfect Son to die for me on a cross. I'm sorry for how I've acted. I'm sorry for the things that I've done. God, I'm giving all that to you right now. All my sins, all my worries, all my cares, all my anxieties, I'm giving them to you. Save me, change me. Thank you for dying for me. I want to live for you now. I turn away from those things and go and run to you. Now, with everybody still closed eyes and bowed heads, if somebody this morning, that was you, and you gave your life to Jesus, I'm not going to have a parade for you right now or anything like that. I just want to celebrate with you. If that's you this morning in this place that you're sitting in right now, and that's you, and you want to be recognized for that, I want to recognize you so that we can celebrate with you. We're not going to bring you up front or anything like that. Is there anybody this morning that says, slip up your hand really quick and say, I asked Christ into my life this morning. I gave my life to Jesus. Anybody this morning? Anybody at all? Please know this morning online, if you're watching, this idea of the gospel, this isn't something where you have to be in a special service. This doesn't have to be a time where you have to do it right now when you're hearing the speaker on the screen or whatever the case may be. The invitation for Jesus is always open, 24/7. All you have to do is speak to Him, and He'll change your life forever. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for helping us understanding that bitterness is something that is a problem that must be dealt with. But God, we can't deal with it on our own. We have to trust you. We can only be better if we give everything that we have to the best, and that's you. God, help us to understand that as we continue throughout the rest of our week. We love you so much. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. And amen. Guys, thank you so much for being